now.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I need
Once again, everybody, thank you for joining us on another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. And we're joined again, and we're graced by Colonel Larry Wilkerson. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing fine. A little colder, but fine. This crazy climate going from 52 degrees to 30 degrees.
And it was cold last night here in Florida. But Larry, you and I were talking right before the show. I want to play a clip for you, okay? And this is about President Trump and what he said. He said the Continental Army seized airports. So I want you to listen to this, man, because it's unbelievable. He said that George Washington and the Continental Army seized airports back in the 1700s. So it's a short clip, but check it.
In June of 1775, the Continental Congress created a unified army out of the revolutionary forces encamped around Boston and New York, and named after the great George Washington, Commander-in-Chief. The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge, found glory across the waters of the Delaware, and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our army manned the airport. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do. And at Fort McHenry, under the rocket's red glare, it had nothing but victory. And when dawn came, their star-spangled banner waved defiant.
You make of that? This man said that the Continental Army seized airports in the 1700s. What is that? What is that about, Colonel?
I have no idea, except I'm sincere when I say this. I think, like Joe Biden at the end of his administration, Donald Trump at the beginning of his administration, only a year in, is suffering serious dementia. I don't say that frivolously. I think he is. And the sad thing about this, the dangerous thing about this, as Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken flowed into Biden's dementia and did things that they should not have done, particularly with regard to Israel, people like Hegseth and Rubio and Noem and Kash Patel and others are going to flow, Bondi, into Trump's dementia, and Steve Miller, par excellence, do what they want to do. That's the scary thing right now. And Trump's going to bless it because he is demented and increasingly demented, I think. So it's a very serious issue, I think. It's subject of humor. Yes, I watch, comedians are making hay while the sun shines for this, and the sun is shining brilliantly. But it is extremely dangerous what we're doing, because all these people around Trump are extremely dangerous people.
So what is the affair in Venezuela? What is this all about? I know it's about blocking Cuba and economy. I know it has something to do with China, and I know it has something to do with Russia. But what is it really about? Because it is costing money to deploy troops down. Forces down there, and it's costing political capital to do what they've done there because the world has now turned against them. And even some of the allies are saying Trump and the administration has become so reckless that they can no longer trust them or control the U.S.
True. And as significant as our allies feeling that way are our potential enemies like China, Russia, and others. They are moving to do things that are going to be majorly inimical to our interests. But let's go back to Venezuela. The prima facie reason was not narco-terrorism, which probably doesn't even exist to the extent that Trump has claimed. And his own DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, says that. So I got to see this trial they're going to have. But I know how they conduct trials too. So the ostensible reason, the reason it made some sense, was 300 billion barrels of oil, the largest known reserve in the world, and high sulfur content oil, which is very, very important for diesel. And America's production system and delivery system, transportation system in its own country runs principally on, well, let's say 52% are trucks, other rail and things like that, but it all uses diesel, particularly the trucks. So we need that very badly. And Charles Koch and his refineries, which do this kind of high sulfur content oil, need it very badly. And Charles Koch is a billionaire who has been influencing the government for a long time. So that's ostensibly and a legitimate reason. It's illegal what we've done to fulfill that reason, totally illegal, even in international law, but also in domestic law because the Congress didn't approve it. But the real reason, I think, underneath this comes from Project 2025, from the Heritage Foundation, and from other realists, if you will, like John Mearsheimer, for example. The real reason is China now owns 60% of South America in terms of economic might. Look at that port they've built in Peru. That port is negating the Panama Canal. It is fabulous. I had a conversation with a friend of mine in Lima recently. It's an incredible port, what they've done. What China has done is not predatory capitalism on its face like we do. You know, we rape, pillage, and plunder in South America. We ally ourselves with the top 5%, and then we do whatever we damn well please, and they enrich themselves while we do it. China has come in and put real money, which incidentally we don't have, towards these projects that are benefiting the people in South America. Now, you can claim all day long that this is a long-term plan to have control over these people. Okay, but it's working. I'm sorry, it's working. And they have real adherents in China now, and they have the majority of the economic interaction with Chile, with Argentina, with Ecuador, with Brazil, with Peru. That's the real reason about Venezuela, because we're saying not so subtly to China, get your ass out of South America. And China's not going to correspond with that at all.
Well,
so we've wasted a lot of time and money. You're right.
Well, how is it that America, first of all, Trump said something that caught my ear yesterday and day before yesterday. He said that, especially talking about Greenland, and I'm going to pivot back to Venezuela. He said that America will take Greenland, even though America already has bases there, because he doesn't want Russia or China to be his neighbor. But if we look up to Alaska, Russia is already the neighbor of the United States. So what is he saying? And why aren't any reporters bringing this, that Russia is already the United States neighbor? Because Alaska was once Russian territory. So,
yeah, and it's not very far from Alaska to Russia, right, across the Barents Sea. Trump doesn't know geography at all. He really doesn't. He's shown that throughout the Ukraine war, making statements about, despite his effort to stop the war, which I applaud, he hasn't done a very good job of it. I don't applaud that. And it's because he's a coward. But he doesn't do geography. He doesn't know geography. It's not just Boston and New York and airports that the that the British Empire built in the New World and that the Continental Army used. He's reading from a script and he can't even read well. That's his problem. But he doesn't do geography and he doesn't do history. And any fool looking out, I mean, even a fool looking out across Greenland knows what you said is true and knows that if you were to use force to take Greenland, or if you just occupied it, you wouldn't even have to use force, just occupy it. No one's going to contest you probably. You don't know, though. If you did, you would negate NATO overnight because that's an attack on one. So the rest of NATO, including the United States and Canada, is supposed to come against the United States. So he's saying essentially, okay, NATO is moribund. I know that. My policies, Ukraine, the Europeans, the war in Ukraine has nullified NATO. It no longer is a very important alliance. So I'm ending it. I'm going to take Greenland. That's what he's doing. It's just nonsense, but it's dangerous nonsense.
So with that said, as I said, I was going to pivot back to Venezuela. Who do you think helped to sell out Maduro to U.S. interests? Because now I don't believe a lot of the stuff that comes out of Trump's mouth about they're going to run Venezuela and this is going on and that is going on. America's getting this and getting that. Who do you think close to him sold him out? Because the government and other people like his son-in-law and his brother, they're still powerful people in Venezuela.
There's a number of theories there, and I have a couple myself. I'm not so sure about this vice president because she's always been a first-rate schemer, and she's always been the kind of person who would throw out the accusation against her opponents that they were linked with the CIA, and that would get rid of them usually because they didn't like people being linked with the CIA there. But what I think has happened is these two people who have been feeding Laura Loomer intelligence, and Laura Loomer's been feeding it to Trump. And what really got his attention was after he lost the election to Biden. And what these two people who were feeding this information to Laura Loomer came up with was that Dominion, remember the company that was accused of having fixed the vote, was used by Maduro to cause Trump to lose that election. And that's what really got Trump's immediate in-your-face attention about Maduro. Previously, it was a little narco-terrorism, is oil, that sort of thing. But that really got his attention. Now, your question is answered by this one person is a dual citizen, Israeli, U.S. He's also probably a Mossad member. He's linked with Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who is probably also a Mossad agent or works with Mossad. And they're linked up with Gary Bernson, who was the head of the Al-Qaeda station in Afghanistan when my administration, George W. Bush and the military and everybody went into Afghanistan immediately after 9/11. He was essentially released from Afghanistan because he got so angry at him for not doing what he wanted to be done and went into private business. And he and this Israeli American have been working intelligence out of Venezuela, principally out of Caracas, for a long time, making tons of money and feeding the intelligence that they thought was pertinent to Trump's wishes to Trump through Laura Loomer. So I would say that that's probably one of the sources of information that they got because they made lots of contacts with the very worst people in Venezuela, people who would give them up secrets in a heartbeat for money. And they made some money off of it too. I'm told they made quite a bit of money off of it. So Tulsi Gabbard, forget her. CIA, forget them. This was the source of the intelligence that Trump was getting. And now it's probably at least a portion of what he's still getting because they're very interested in putting some of these people they've been working with and being highly paid by, mind you, into power. And the vice president, I don't think, is one of them. So you've got this tension in Venezuela right now between that coterie and the vice president's group, which is the official group. So let's just look at what we did. We used billions of dollars worth of U.S. military gear and men and women We went in and did a precise surgical operation, plucked this guy out, put him down in a courtroom in New York with charges built by Bill Barr that go all the way back to Papa Bush that wouldn't stand up in a court, probably won't, but they'll make them stand up. They'll fix it so it stands up. But what if he were exonerated? What if the court said, no, he's not guilty? But at the same time, look at the real facts on the ground. We haven't done a damn thing. We haven't done anything except waste all that money and pull Maduro out. It's not like Just Cause in Panama, where we pretty much annihilated the opposition in Panama for years to come and established our own government there. We have not done any of that. We did all of this just to snatch a single individual and bring him to New York. And what's happening in Venezuela right now tells me we aren't going to do much more because the forces in Venezuela are closing ranks against us. And we're hearing from the majors, big oil companies, we don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. It's 10 years, it's multi-billions of dollars, and it's dangerous. And we've been there before, dude. So Trump is angry. I'm told right now he was angry as hell at the heads of these oil companies because they told him.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that Maduro will be returned to Venezuela like Hugo Chavez was returned to Venezuela? Because it's a lot of pressure internationally. You see South Africa speaking, you see all of the BRICS nations and all of the global South, even some European nations have now spoken against. And I think they've done that because they're frightened about what's going on with Greenland and the United States.
And Canada even.
Yeah. So
you see this morning, we're going to start kinetic strikes.
In Mexico.
Yeah.
So do you think that that the U.S. will return with this mounting pressure will return Maduro back? Because I heard one of the key witnesses turn against the case or whatever, and then we also see that the United States admitted that there was no so-called group cartel that the president of Venezuela was a part of, even though they used that as a justification to kidnap him. So
when their own drug enforcement agency, you could go on their website and you found literally nothing of consequence against Venezuela and Maduro. You found it against Ecuador, you found it against Colombia, but not against Venezuela. So their own DEA was objecting to them indirectly on its website. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, and to your question, I wouldn't be surprised to see if we get a really honest trial, which is hard to do in this country. Look at what happened in Minnesota. They just plucked that situation out of there and took it away from the really competent investigative service in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And Noam goes on and says, I saw the video. I know what happened in the video. That woman was trying to kill that ICE agent. You lying sack of proverbial decoding horseshit, you know? But that could happen with this trial too. I'm not too happy about the guy who's the judge. What is he, 82? And he's shall we say, a right-wing Jewish judge. That's not a good sign. But who knows? He might be an honest man. Might be a decent trial, and then Trump's going to look really bad.
Do you think that there's any negotiations, a give and take between Venezuela and the United States to get Maduro back, making some kind of concessions on a U.S. presence or reopening up a U.S. embassy or to give concessions to certain companies to work freely in there for the return of the legitimate president of Venezuela?
That's all subject to what they want, and they is those in power, to include the very powerful people around Rodriguez. If they don't want him back, they will protest mightily about wanting him back, but they won't want him back. Not really. I don't know. I can't crawl into their heads. I know there's some pretty awful people around her, and they were around him. When I say awful, they'd kill you in a heartbeat, cut your tongue out, throw it away. And it's not necessarily drugs, it's money, and it's money from gold, it's money from the oil. which is where most of the money was going into their pockets. So there is corruption. There's no question about that. And there are very powerful people circling around that corruption. So they might not want him back. We might have done them we might have done Rodriguez a favor. I just don't know.
Well, his brother and his son, they're power brokers there too. So
yes.
Wouldn't they have a say in this because they that's their father and brother, and they hold powerful positions.
Yeah, you'd think so. I would think that Rodriguez would be pretty. Well, I can't say straightforward because no one's straightforward in this, but basically for having him back. But I don't know her. I know people who do know her, and I know people have told me very different things about her, some good, some bad, and some indifferent. One of the people who knew her the longest said she was really unscrupulous as hell and would do almost anything to maintain power. I don't know that that's a fair characterization of her, but I do know that I have dealt with Plan Colombia, $750 million we gave to Colombia. I've dealt with the Venezuelans indirectly through the Cubans because I was part of Obama's attempt to have a rapprochement with Cuba. Went to Cuba 9 times, traveled throughout the region, saw what Cuba's doctors were doing in the barrios in Venezuela, in Colombia, and in Brazil. But I also saw what the Cubans were doing in terms of offering their very excellent professional services to people like Maduro for bodyguards. So Cuba's got not a mixed record, but a different kind of record in each of those countries. And Cuba's being punished mightily in this too. We just work with Cuba. Santiago de Cuba is the biggest city in Cuba outside of Havana. It's a long way from Havana. 15,000 homes lost their roofs in Melissa in the hurricane. We have done nothing. We have done zero. Even my president, George W. Bush, when the BAM earthquake happened in 2003, I think it was, we sent guard dogs, fire departments. We sent everything we could send because there were 30,000 people killed. Well, Cuba's been ravaged by this and nothing. We've given them nothing. So we've sent some solar power generators down there and some other things. And the Cubans are really worried. Marco Rubio wants them more than anything else. He wants that whole place. He's never been there in his life. And he talks like he knows Cuba because his daddy lived there and was one of Batista's right-hand men, So this is a real nightmare for that region right now in terms of what we're doing with these tankers, in terms of what we've done with Venezuela, might do with Mexico, and might do, they think, with even other countries in South America. Let me give you a really concrete example. The most competent leader in Brazil is Lula. And no one argues with that. Even those who don't like him in other South American countries, they don't argue with the fact that he's probably the best leader in the continent. He was going very forthrightly with the BRICS movement to de-dollarize, to replace the dollar in terms of world commerce. Dangerous move in some respects. And it's got to have China, and China doesn't want anything to do with it because China sees what happens to countries that assume that kind of responsibility. They have massive inflation. They outlive their debt or don't outlive their debt. They increase their debt massively. Look at the pound sterling. Look at the Dutch guilder. Look at any empire in the past. The principal way they've ruined themselves is with their irresponsibility with finances. And that's what being the transactional currency, the reserve currency does for you. So China doesn't want that. But Brazil had entered full force into that move, and they were making progress. They were doing all kinds of commodity exchanges across the world in renminbi, in real, in rubles, other currencies. And it was slowly eroding our power and control. Lula backed out. He backed out when he saw this. And we brought some pressure to bear on Brasilia, and Lula's out of that now. He's not part of that de-dollarization movement. He'll probably come back when it's safe to do so. But that's the threat we still can wield. And we wield that in South America big time.
What is the state of the Brazilian military?
I haven't worked with them in a long time. I used to work with them quite frequently, both in aviation and infantry. I can't really tell you. They're probably as good as anybody else in South America. Bolsonaro made a mess of things. The rotation between the super liberal, if you will, like Lula, and the super conservative and even Trump-like Bolsonaro made a mess. The military doesn't, its loyalties go like this.
Oh, so how does America maintain, before we transition to the Israeli-Iranian conflict, how does America maintain her strategic position there, especially spending all of this money for carrier groups and for bases and all of this stuff just to hold the gun to Venezuela? And can that be maintained right now, especially with the dollar dying and the economy collapsing?
Excellent point. And I would say quickly, we're doing that while China's building state-of-the-art ports on the Pacific Ocean for Peru that will wind up totally negating the Panama Canal. And it won't be just Peru that ships through these ports. I mean, it's going to be all of South America. So we're doing this kinetic, military-dominated, in-your-face crap. At the same time, China is sneaking in with tons of money and skills and engineers and others and building things for people. Who's going to win that one, do you think?
Right. Now transitioning it a little bit over to the upcoming Iranian conflict in the Middle East. Before we do that, Trump said this. I have to say this because he's threatening every nation, like you said. But on January 9th, this was reported by RT. Trump says he doesn't need international law. The U.S. president has said he is bound only by his own morality after military raids against Venezuela and threats to annex Greenland. Now, we know that he has no moral compass. So that means that he's telling the world he's not bound by anything.
Exactly.
To put his policy over on anybody that he deems a threat. And this is dangerous because we have a simmering conflict in Ukraine. We have a potential conflict between China, and we have a buildup in multiple threats against Iran. And we see Israel is trying to push the levers to try to push the war against Iran. And from what I heard, that Iran is prepared to go all out if they're hit.
I've been watching the contrails in the sky for about 72 hours. Biggest indicator for me. Those contrails up there, multiple contrails, in some cases as far as you can see across the sky, way up there. Those are B-52s. Those are B-2s. Those are huge aircraft that carry lots of things. I think we're getting ready, and I think we're getting ready to do it in Iran. That's another story altogether, because that's going to be extremely dangerous, I think. And if I were the Iranians right now, Rashid, this is my military professional side speaking. If I were the Iranians, I would preempt.
Me too.
I would take Israel out. They have the capacity to do that. I would take Israel out. And I just suffer the consequences of what we'll do, which will probably be nothing but aerial bombing. And aerial bombing in its entire history has never convinced the people to do anything but get mad at you and be even more intact in their effort to oppose you than they were before you bombed them. We actually increased with the 8th Air Force bombing of Germany in World War II. We actually increased German production. Now, I know what the strategy was there. The strategy in World War II was not to destroy German industry. It was to cause the Luftwaffe to come up, to stop those bombers and shoot the Luftwaffe down, so that when we did the operation in Normandy, there would be no German Air Force to oppose us. And it worked. But it had nothing to do with convincing the Germans to stop the war from all the bombing that we were doing. All we did was make them mad and go underground and do things that were necessary to. They actually increased their production. So anyway, back to Iran. I don't think they'll do that. I don't think they'll do that. But I would, as the Ayatollah has intimated, expand the theater.
Mm-hmm.
If, in fact, the United States is obviously in with Israel, which they'll have to do, or Israel will disappear, then they're going to attack us. And we are not ready to be attacked in Southwest Asia. We just do not have the assets to defend the troops and others that are on the ground in Southwest Asia, in Kuwait, in Qatar, in Bahrain, and in Saudi Arabia, and even in Egypt. We do not have the defenses. They're not that kind of installations. So they could really rip us a new ass. What would Trump do about that? Use nukes? And that's what truly troubles me about Southwest Asia. Ukraine to an extent, but Southwest Asia too. I think when Bibi is going under, he'll reach out to Dimona and he'll use nuclear weapons. I have no doubt in my mind that he'll do that. And Trump's restraints on him at that point will be met with an extended middle finger from Bibi. Bibi's already giving him hype. You see what Lindsey Graham said the other day. Because Bibi said publicly, he said, we need to get off the American tit. You know, we need to cut this money. We don't need to be so beholden to any single country. Couldn't believe he said it, but he did. And I'm sure he's got ulterior motives, but he got Trump stirred up and he got Lindsey Graham stirred up. Lindsey Graham actually went on the floor of the Senate and said, I'll cut it I'll cut it earlier than you want to. You know, he got Lindsey mad. You get Lindsey mad, and you got a maniac mad. You have to be very careful about that. So I don't know where we're headed, but it isn't a good place, and I think it's more war and more war.
Mm-hmm. And according to international law, that you're not supposed to threaten to attack other nations. So Iran, if that is the case, then Iran would be within international law and within its rights for a preemptive strike because they're constantly being threatened. Isn't that right?
Yes, we claimed it. We claimed it was a preemptive strike on Saddam Hussein because he was going to use a nuclear weapon or chemical weapons or both against us. That's what we claimed. Kofi Annan at the UN said we were full of crap and said we were illegal in our war, and he was right. Mm-hmm. But we don't care. Let me tell you what's governing Trump now. And this is not new. You know it's not. You're a historian. You know it's not new. The Melian dialogue, Thucydides, the Athenian Empire. This is what's ruling Trump now. I have the power. I do not need morality. Mm-hmm. And I will use it because you do not have the power. That's a valid theory of international relations. It's despicable, but it's a very imperial, recurring throughout 3,000 years of human history way to deal with the world. It's the way most empires, I'm sad to say, dealt with the world.
And you see the track record of the empires that dealt with the world that way. All gone.
Not a one of them left.
And that's one of my points that I was making on one of the shows. I say everybody keeps saying that America will be one of the poles of power in this multipolar world. But if you look at history, as I tell everybody, and if you look at patterns, if America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, she has a military expansion. She's around the globe. She's alienated everybody. She has no industrial base anymore, no manufacturing base anymore. So when the debt comes home, and it's time to pay the bill for it, she won't have the resource. Yes, she's rich with a lot of minerals, but it costs money to extract those minerals. Right. So when the dollar loses its purchasing power, which is now, I think they said 97% of the dollar's purchasing power has been eroded. How can America maintain itself as a global pole of power when the dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency and the debt comes due? It's an impossibility.
Well, you're right in the long term, but in the short term, which can be somewhat, can be past Trump's tour. Even if he gets a second term, he won't live for that, I don't think. But you can live for a while off this power theory. You take it from others. You simply take it from others. You take the gold, the silver, the oil, whatever you need, the lithium, the rare earth metal. You take it from others, and you generally take it with military might. That is a theory of international relations. Ask John Mearsheimer. He seems to like it these days. I mean, he almost seems overjoyed that somebody's finally doing that in the world, and Trump is he. Yeah. But you can last for a while on military power, especially if you're robbing your allies, such as they are, of the money to do it with. And they're so scared, they don't mind paying you. I mean, let's face it. China was paying us in a manner of speaking. They were buying our notes. Now they're dumping our notes. Japan was paying us. Now they're not buying our notes because they've got their own economic crisis. So when all that comes together and you get no one to buy our debt, no one to support us, and we don't have anything, as you just indicated, of our own to generate that wealth, then we're in real trouble.
So in essence, it's like this analysis that I gave. You have the snake that and the head is cut off, but the body continues to contort for hours after that, and only when rigor mortis set in does the people around realize that the snake is actually dead. But the head still has venom in it, so you have to bury the head. So that's what you're talking about, that America can still live off just pure military power for a little bit. And so she's like the snake with the head cut off.
Right. Ricardo Alarcón at the time was the head of the Cuban National Congress, sort of like speaker or whatever, when I was working for Obama in Cuba. And I was in a protocol house with him one time. He was drinking scotch. He loves scotch, but he got us some pretty good rum. I was drinking rum. And we were talking to each other. And I mentioned something about the deterioration of the empire, and maybe Cuba could just wait us out, you know. Man, just conversation over a good drink. He looked at me and he said, even a dying elephant can thrash a lot of grass.
Good analysis. Good one.
He's the one that told me one time, it's a typical saying about Cuba, but he said, oh my God, Cuba, so far from God and so close to the United States.
Well, one of our viewers asked a question to you. Says, question, is Bibi in contact with President Putin? Something is behind Russia calling all Russians in Israel to vacate.
I think Bibi has been very much in touch with Erdogan in Ankara and Putin in Moscow and other Xi Jinping. But of late, he has seemed to make some sort of decision. I thought he was exploring a place to move his flag. I really did. The man's smart. He's smart. And there's no question in the greater geopolitical scene on this earth, power's moving away from the West and moving to the East. Majorly so with regard to Central Asia and the course it goes as it goes to China, because China's the magnet for this. So Bibi was really going around looking for a new place to put his flag, a new superpower, if you will, to be his nursemaid or whatever, his big daddy, his sugar daddy. All of a sudden, he quit doing it when Erdogan sort of threw up some real opposition. And you notice what Bibi did then. He went to Cyprus, he went to Greece, and he tried to stir up trouble for Erdogan because he knew Erdogan had the potential to bring some pee to bear on him, particularly in Syria. So I don't know where Bibi's going now. He seems to be running around like that snake you were talking about, with his head maybe bleeding a little bit, and he's not sure where to go. But right now, I'm really fearful of what he might do with Iran, because if they attack him again, either in response to his attack or preemptively, they're going to destroy Israel.
And I know that Israel policies are now alienating China.
Yes.
I saw them selling air defense systems and drones to Taiwan.
Yeah.
And China spoke out about this. So could Russia's call for Russian citizens to vacate Israel be a pre-call before hostilities break out? Because what is it, 1.5 or 2 million Israelis are
well, a lot of them have left. A lot of them have left already, but you're right. There's probably 1 million left. You know, the population in the state of Israel on October the 7th was about 14.7 million. About 7 million of that was Jewish Israelis, and the other 7 million were Christians, Arabs, and others. Okay, so it's about 50-50. In fact, the Palestinian Arabs actually sort of outweighed the Jews. I'm told right now, and Bibi's hid this, he's hid this greatly. He does not want this to get out, that more than 2 million Jewish citizens of Israel have left. They don't want anything to do with it anymore. It's supposed to be a secure haven, it's supposed to be safe. They were supposed to be able to make money and go to discotheques and dance and have a good time and everything, raise their young kids, and maybe every now and then, yeah, they'd have a war, but it was a pretty good place to be. They've left now because for 2 freaking years, it's been war. And they've watched boys and girls die, including IDFers. They've watched them commit suicide at a rate they've never done before. They've watched them get post-traumatic stress. Even the IDF admits it at a rate they've never had before. So I don't know how many are even left in Israel to vacate. But you might be right. You might be right. Those Russians that were there, the group that came in massively, were the best Zionists. They were the best Zionists, and they were the most apt to go to war, put on the uniform and do it and such. So you could be right, and it could be a real problem. And it could be Putin saying, if you want to live, you better get out because hell is coming down upon you. I don't know that, but it would make sense to me because there are people in the world outside of the United States who understand what's going on in Gaza and Syria and in Israel proper and in Lebanon, where Israel has not given up a day. They've been killing people every day. There's no ceasefire any place. There's no ceasefire any place. You know what they're doing with the yellow line? They're actually moving the yellow line every day. And of course, the Palestinians get caught when they move it because they don't tell them they're moving it. And they kill the ones who are on the other side of the yellow line when they shouldn't be. That's their newest tactic. They have the most heinous tactics. First, they use food to kill people and get people to come collect to get food, and then they'd shoot them. Now they're using this yellow line and moving it, and every time they move it, stragglers are killed. So there's no ceasefire. This is a disaster. And in the West Bank, you might as well say that the West Bank is part of Israel now. They don't have to announce it. It's part of Israel. They're just moving and mowing and killing. And to a certain extent, they're extending their writ in Syria too, which is what's going to bring Erdogan in. And Bibi doesn't like that at all because Erdogan's got a real army. So this is fraught for all kinds of problems, and Putin knows it. And he's probably, kind of like we would recognize a problem in Korea or whatever and say, "Come home, you don't want to die." We can't do that in Korea now because we got about 250,000 Americans living in the greater Seoul area. And you can no way you do a non-combatant evacuation operation. It's just too massive. You'd need too many airplanes, too many ships and everything. But I could understand that he would maybe put something out like that. If you don't want to die, come home because it's coming. It's coming. And Russia is allied with Iran now. Formal treaty.
That means a lot. So whatever happened to the peace president? And let me play this little clip for you because it seems like Tulsi Gabbard is trotted out whenever Trump needs cover, and then she goes back and hides and doesn't say anything about the wars of aggression. But this is what she was saying on the campaign trail for Trump.
Vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney, and it's a vote for war, more war, likely World War III and nuclear war. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for a man who wants to end wars, not start them.
I think she's right about the original Donald Trump, but we don't have the original Donald Trump anymore. We have a demented character.
And this is what she said here about Trump after he became president.
One of the ways that President Trump is honoring your service, our service, generation after generation after generation, is fundamentally and first and foremost repeating over and over again and showing through his actions and his leadership that he wants his legacy as president to be one of a peacemaker. He wants to be the president who makes sure that our brothers and sisters in uniform are no longer sent to fight in stupid wars that do not serve the interests of the American people and our nation's security. And in wars and conflicts in different parts of the world where we don't have U.S. troops serving, he has still already made historic progress negotiating peace deals, sometimes between countries who have been at war or in conflict with each other for decades. President Trump understands what our military is for, the sacrifices that not only our servicemen and women make, but the sacrifices that their families make alongside them, their spouses and their children. He understands and applies through his policies what it means to put the American people's interests first and foremost, and expresses that care.
Wonder how she feels now.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder how she feels now with the kidnapping of a sitting president, breaking all of the international norms, and then saying, I'm not bound by international law. I'm above international law, and I can do it because I'm the president of the most powerful nation on the planet.
And to demonstrate that, I'm going to take Greenland. I'm going to affect military action in the sovereign nation of Mexico. And I'm also going to help those people protesting in Iran by bumping off that Islamic regime. I mean, Tulsi, what do you think now? I can't believe she's still there, Rashid. I really can't believe she's still there. I knew her a little bit. I worked with her on the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement with Iran. She knew more about it than my team did. She was so well versed in it. She'd read it cover to cover, and she was debating whether she was going to vote against it or for it. And so we went to meet with her, and I was very impressed with her intellect and very impressed with the diligence she took to looking at that executive agreement, treaty, whatever you want to call it, closely. I don't even recognize her now. She has become a minion of a tyrant.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying. It seems like politics changes people, U.S. politics in particular, but it seems also that, like, as I said, she's only trotted out whenever it is to defend or to give cover to the administration. And what happened to her so-called morals? What happened to her so-called ethics? To stand up and tell the truth, because she said she would not bow, or she would not break. She would tell the truth to power. And it seems like to me that she is, once you submit, you become part of the problem.
That plus each time she does it, the most dramatic moment, of course, on the airplane, Air Force One, when he was getting on, the reporter asked him about, well, your DNI said this, and he said, I don't care. I mean, that's pretty dismissive. Your director of national intelligence said this, and you're contradicting, and you don't care. That's what he said.
And then he said,
she should have quit right there. She should have quit right there.
And then after the accident, the same reporter said, so, but your DEI said such and such. He said, then she's wrong.
Yeah. Even little old me would have said, I'm out of here, dude. I can't work for you.
So the arrogance. Do you see war? Because I've heard from a few people that the United States was resupplying those bases in Israel long before they invaded Venezuela. Do you see war coming in the next few weeks or months? Because it seems like it's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of heating up over there in West Asia between Iran and Israel. And I thought that the reason that they got rid of Assad was to free Syrian airspace so that Israel can make and the U.S. can make unimpeded airstrikes through Syria, through Jordan, through Iraq, up into Iran, and they try to decapitate Hezbollah as to remove that threat of Hezbollah's forces coming into the mix, and now they're attacking Hamas. Do you think that all of this is strategic to weaken all of the axes of resistance so that they can focus solely on Iran and try to take Iran's leadership out?
Well, let's go back to Pete Hegseth's claims about taking out the Houthis, Al-Ansar. Didn't work. The Houthis are still there. And in fact, the Houthis drove the United States Navy out of the Red Sea all by themselves. So these kinds of things don't often turn out the way you think they're going to turn out. And I think this is one that's writ large to be that way. I just don't see how we are going to do anything to Iran at this particular juncture with Israel or without Israel that is so significant that the repercussions are not worse than the action.
Mhm.
And
And
if they go whole hog, I mean, we're talking about big casualties, U.S. casualties in Al Udeid, in King Khalifa, in the what do we call it in Kuwait? It's the largest throughput organization in Southwest Asia, maybe in the world. It's where we put troops through if we have to fight in Southwest Asia somewhere. Really magnificent facility. And then we've got facilities in Egypt, and we still got, although we're trying desperately to get them out, facilities in Iraq. And of course, we've got facilities in Saudi Arabia, and not for a minute that I don't think Iran wouldn't go after those too if it were with its back against the wall. It knew it was up against Israel and Donald Trump in the United States. It'd go all out.
And they can also reach U.S. assets in the Indian Ocean, also in the Arabian Gulf.
And one wonders what those hypersonic missiles, which we have not seen used against an aircraft carrier, will do. I wouldn't be surprised to see an aircraft carrier with 5,000 souls on board in Davy Jones' locker on the bottom of the ocean.
Well, why would Trump do this, even with pressure from Israel? Because if Iran closes off the Strait of Hormuz, then oil prices is going to skyrocket regardless, and we're seeing that the economic effect upon America would be devastating.
I do think that Iran would be very reluctant to do that and would restrain itself, even if it were in a preemptive war itself, because the number one buyer of Iraq's oil is China. And Russia's in a signature alliance with Iran. But China, I think, has committed to back Russia up in that alliance. And I think one of the principal reasons, is because China gets so much oil from Iraq. So isn't that curious that we went to war in Iraq and China's the biggest buyer of their oil? But it's not curious if you've read Dennis Fritz's book, Deadly Betrayal, because we did the Iraq war in terms of oil, not for us or for any of our allies. We did it for Israel. And Dennis Fritz's book ought to be read by every American because it tells you we did it for Israel. So China does get most of that oil coming through the strait. It gets a lot from Russia too, but that's a significant, I forget, it's over 20%, I think, of China's oil. So they will want Iran to keep the strait open and might even offer help to keep the strait open. They've put ships over there before, and I know they've reconned it thoroughly. I know the PLN, the Chinese Navy, knows that area pretty well. So they might even put ships there to make sure that to help Iran keep the strait open, not close it.
And don't you think that if this thing goes down, because I've heard also that some of the people in power were very mad when the Ayatollah and the Iranian president accepted the ceasefire because they were destroying Israel. Do you think this time it'll be too much pressure for them to accept the ceasefire when they start? Because Israel is only like the size of New Jersey. And Iran is like the size of Alaska. Iran is like the size of Alaska, and
90 million people versus 14 million people.
And what is it? Alaska is what, 2 times the size of Texas. So we're looking at a major discrepancy in land mass. So do you think that they would be under the Ayatollah and the leadership would be under tremendous pressure by the IRGC not to commit to a ceasefire after being attacked this time, because they also have constituents that they have to play to?
Well, the situation in Iran right now, as I understand it, and I'm going to go to a webinar here at noon to see a little bit more. I've had a person in Tehran, and I've had a person in Bandar Abbas, and one elsewhere in the north, recently kind of giving me a readout on these protests. And the way I read the protests from this input that I've gotten is, yes, there are genuine protests because the Iranian currency has been devalued to the point now where they can't even buy foodstuffs. I mean, they're in deep kimchi in terms of the problems that they have with their economy. So yeah, they're mad at the government for allowing that to happen, and they're really mad at the IRGC because they know most of the money the government does make, particularly off oil and gas, is ripped off by the IRGC commanders. So they're angry with that too. But they know the IRGC will shoot them for their anger. So there's genuine protests going on in Iran right now. But here's the situation that's going to develop if Iran goes preemptively to war, or even more so, we attack with Israel. It's going to make the people fuse. They will no longer be angry with their government. They will hate our guts, because this is exactly what happened when Israel attacked them before. They became a nation at that moment. They will do that again. And despite all the problems they're having, they understand that a large part of their economic problems is due to our sanctions and European sanctions. And so they're not stupid people. In fact, person for person, Iran's one of the smartest countries in the world. And 51% Persian, they used to run the world. And they ran it rather well. One of the few empires in that past period that really ran its empire fairly well. Cyrus the Great, for example, in Hebrew, was called Messiah by the Jews because he treated the Jews within his empire so well. Jews forget that today very, very handily. But if you fuse those Iranians in a opposition that is as it's equipped right now, you're never going to beat them. You're just never going to beat them. The only way you would ever have a prayer of beating them would be to put 2 or 3 million soldiers on the ground and march from one end of Iran to the other and defeat them. And that would require you to take about 1 million casualties. So there's no, I've done the war planning for this. Remember back in 78 and 79 when the Soviets moved into Afghanistan? We thought, we being the United States Army, we thought we were going to have to fight in Afghanistan because we couldn't believe the Soviets were just going to stop in Afghanistan. They've always wanted, Russia has always wanted, before Catherine the Great, warm water ports on the Southern Sea at the end of the Persian Gulf, Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, places like that. We were convinced the Russians were coming on down through Iran and going to take those warm water ports. So we did war planning. Man, we came away from that saying, if you ever have to fight in the Zagros Mountains in the heart of Iran, you don't want to do it. That's tough territory. And so you would have the Houthis times 20, times 30 in those mountains and fighting you every step of the way, every minute. You don't want that. This isn't Iraq with deserts, flat deserts where you can fly airplanes everywhere and all. We dropped bombs on their nuclear points. I don't think we did hardly anything to them. I think we just made the ground rumble a little bit. They had already moved a lot of the equipment because they were forewarned. And the bombs really don't penetrate that deeply to do major damage. So that's how tough this terrain is. It's really tough. And they've been taught by the North Koreans, the best underground workers in the world, how to do that underground in Iran. So you just don't want this war, but it looks like Trump does, and it looks like Bibi does.
With and in closing, I just have 2 more questions for you. One is about, we talked about the state of the Iranian economy due to sanctions, but couldn't Iran make a deal with Russia and China? Look, we need a currency swap. We need capital here to stabilize the economy a little bit, so that we won't. We can put down the protests and we can stabilize the food prices and everything like that. Do you think that they are smart enough to talk to their allies and raise these points to them to try to secure capital in there to level off the economy?
Well, it sounds good, but there are 2 things that are really militating against it. One is the Iranians don't like to admit that they need help in that way.
Yeah, true.
The government. 2, Russia has got its hands full. They're winning in Ukraine. There's no question, but they got their hands full, and we're making a mess for them in Georgia and in other places along the southern rim of the Caucasus too. And so he's got his eyes in a lot of places. We're also making a mess, trying to make a mess for him up there in the Baltic. We're trying to use some of the NATO members to, go after the Ghost Fleet. And we're looking at Kaliningrad. Remember that stupid statement by that army general? And we're also making some, shall I say, sub-ocean attempts to disturb them just short of the Arctic, north of Murmansk. So we're keeping him busy. And I don't know if it's Trump doing that or the CIA, Mossad, and MI6. It might be. Trump might not even know this is going on. So he can't really do too much. China is very, very concerned about disturbing its victory. It's winning, and it doesn't want to do anything, particularly militarily, that would disturb that victory, maybe even bring on a hot war with the United States. It would win, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. So China is very reluctant to do anything more than just, back up Russia in its alliance, now formal alliance with Iran. It'd be hard. I'm not saying they couldn't do that, but it would be hard given those three factors to get it done, and to get it done in any timely way. Bibi's in a hurry. He's in a hurry. He knows his time is limited. He knows he's toast probably in the next 14 to 15 months. So he's got to finish his mandate. And his mandate, like China's with Taiwan, Bibi's mandate is not through until he's got Iran as a vassal state.
And last question, how do you think that ends up when they attack Iran? And what would be the cost for not just Israel, but for the United States and NATO also?
Significant, I think. You can go back to the war game that General Paul Van Riper conducted, not once, but twice, because we didn't like the first set of results. So he did it a second time and got pretty much the same results. Iran essentially handed us our rear ends. It's just too big and too vast. And, you're really taking on a nation here. 51% of them are Persian. And you're taking on a fairly homogeneous nation of 90 million people. You don't do that too well if you're the United States military. We didn't do too well in Afghanistan. We didn't do too well in Iraq. Well, we can snatch Maduro's. But when it comes to really fighting a full-up war against a dedicated, competent enemy, we haven't done that since World War II. I would not even argue we did that in Korea.
Once again, Colonel, you hit it out of the park. I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom. From time to time I have to hit you up just to pick your brain a little bit, and I'm glad we had you on the show today.
Good to be with you.
I'll send you the video. Be blessed and be safe.
Yeah, I wish the world were a more hopeful place.
It's looking bad, Colonel. It's looking bad.
It is.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, sir. Everybody, listen. We've just had Colonel Wilkerson on. He gave us a great treat. I want everybody now. Listen, before we go, I got to say this. With the economic crisis spiraling out of control, the decline of America's currency, and the decline of its purchasing power, non-existent manufacturing, non-existent industry, and we see that China daily is filing more patents for more things, and they're outstripping the United States in almost everything. Again, I ask you, for the competent people, how will America remain a global power after the dollar collapses? When empire is forced to retreat? For those of you who say that she will, I have this to say.
What you talking about, Willis?
On that note, I want to thank you all for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, on God's green earth. This is your platform for education, elevation, and edification. This is the Red Pill Diaries, and this little channel is your favorite channel's favorite channel. I want to say this in going out. Do right by others, not because there's some material gain to be had or some accolades to be had. Do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do, because even when no one else is watching you, remember, God Almighty is watching you. Hit the like and subscribe button as we're talking. And I want you to know, as my great, beautiful, and late mother would say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, freedom, justice, and equality. But know that the God that I serve will always love you better. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true. But above all things, remember to stay righteous, because righteousness is the only thing that's going to get you out of here. I love you all. Peace. We're out of here. Mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just